Good evening, everyone. This is the Groton Board of Selectmen's meeting for Monday, October 2nd, 2017. 7 p.m. We have announcements and to review the agenda, which we're doing. Does anyone have any announcements before I begin? Barry?
So this is an announcement from the Chief of Police. Due to the several situations we had in September, they did not do their normal fall training for firearm certification. So they're going to schedule firearms as well as defensive tactics recertifications for October. What this is going to mean is a very aggressive schedule down at the range. And while they'll try to be sensitive to neighbors, they need to get this done before the bad weather. They're going to try to break it up so as at a minimum, but please understand that there's things that happen here in Groton. It delayed the reality of them trying to recertify, so it might be a more intensive period of recertification, and I know that disturbs neighbors sometimes. We have to get this done to make sure our police department is functioning properly.
Can you just specify where the range is for people who don't know?
I honestly do not know where the range is.
It's down by
located on Cow Pond Brook Road behind the highway garage.
Frozen. Any further announcements from anyone?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to remind the board that tomorrow night, Tuesday, October 3rd, beginning at 7 o'clock, you will be holding an open meeting law training in this room at Town Council. It will be broadcast on cable. We will record it, and it will be for all to see, either live or after the fact.
Very good. Becky?
And I had meant to say last week, but I think we somehow shortchanged ourselves on announcement time. To just commend and express our thanks to Police Chief Don Palma and our Fire Chief Steele McCurdy, who spent all day at Groton Fest and participated in the community event. It really speaks highly of their commitment to our town.
Very good. Any further? I suppose I'd be remiss at not pointing out that we had a major tragedy again, gun-related in Las Vegas. I know that's not Groton, but certainly almost 60 people lost their lives and over 500 people were injured at the hands of a gun and an individual. So our condolences go out to those family members that lost loved ones and the entire community of Las Vegas. The rest of the agenda moves forward with the public comment period at 7:05 p.m., followed by the town manager's report. We will consider discussing the selectmen's agenda schedule, consider ratifying the town manager's appointment of Jennifer Wade as a custodian transfer station attendant, review and approve the final draft of the 2017 fall town meeting warrant, consider issuing guidance to the town manager on the fiscal 19 budget development, consider approving a one-day beer and wine license at the First Parish Church on Saturday, October 7th, 2017. Consider approving another one-day beer and wine license at the First Parish Church on Sunday, November 4th. And then at 7:15, the Electric Light Commission will be before us discussing the disposition of 23 Station Avenue. And under other business, a discussion regarding the Board of Selectmen process of budget guidance, and a discussion regarding notification to the board when two members are involved in discussion with current or potential stakeholders. That'll be followed by liaison reports and the minutes of a regularly scheduled meeting of September 18th, 2017. We'll begin with a public comment period where you have up to 3 minutes to talk to this board about any issues that you may have on your mind. So does anyone have anything to say? Miss Ellen, could someone pass her the microphone, please?
Please, thank you. Miss Ellen, Main Street. How does it go with the computers to have the different meetings posted into your interest in different meetings to be, so you can connect to the meetings?
We're still working on it. It's not ready yet.
Okay.
It's in process.
Okay. I also wanted to remind people if they want to go to town meeting, to contact, and they have an accessibility problem, to talk to the town man, not the town clerk, rather. if they have accessibility questions.
If I can follow up on something that Ms. Ellen brought up at our August 28th meeting, and talking to Bob Coleman before the meeting tonight, she'd asked the possibility of having closed captioning on selectmen's meetings, in town meetings. Bob has downloaded or uploaded, I should say, selectmen's meetings, the last 3 selectmen's meetings on YouTube. and if you go on YouTube, they automatically have closed captioning.
Really?
So if you do a search on YouTube with the Groton channel, Board of Selectmen meetings, the last 3 will come up, and they are closed captioned. Now, the spelling on some of them are off. Let's not read too much into that.
Very good, but that's a good alternative.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Anything further from anyone? Not seeing anything. Town managers report.
Mr. Chairman, what I would like to do with the town manager's report is get some of the easy things out of the way first so that we can start the light department right at 7:15, because I know that that's an important issue and I want to give it time. But first of all, I would ask the Board of Selectmen to consider ratifying my appointment of Jennifer Wade as a custodian transfer station attendant for the DPW.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I ask the board to consider approving a one-day beer and wine license for First Parish Church on Saturday, October 7th, from 7 to 10 for a Liverpool night. I'd ask the board to approve that request.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion?
Yeah, I need to know what a Liverpool night is.
Really, I can tell you,
I mean, if it's a Beatles thing, then
It
it's
is.
just too easy, okay.
definitely a
All right.
Beatles.
Thank
You
you.
can come and sing Beatles songs like live karaoke with an excellent band, or you can hear other people play and sing much better than probably if it was me singing.
Now I know why they need the beer and wine license.
It's a lot of fun. You should come.
Do you need to know anything else?
I believe it is open to the public. Anyone can come.
Excellent. Time for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask the board to consider approving a one-day beer and wine license for First Parish Church for Saturday, November 4th from 6:30 to 9:30 for an evening of Irish songs and stories with Kate Chadbourne. I'd ask the board to consider approving that request.
So moved.
Any questions?
Second.
No, see, that's how you do it. You say Irish songs and music, and it's just obvious.
Oh, we thought maybe you were gonna need that explained too.
You know, I was going to say that, but he's my boss, so I did it. So
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Mr. Chairman, we're 5 minutes ahead of schedule, but Kevin, is everybody from your commission here that's going to be here tonight?
Well, another commissioner was here, but I have no doubt that he wouldn't mind if we were done when he got here.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to defer the last 2 items in the town manager's report until after the meeting with the Light Commission, if that's okay with you?
I would just suggest we wait till 7:15 in case somebody who's a neighbor or somebody wants to show up and discuss it. There's other things that we can do.
You can do liaison reports.
We can do liaison reports. We can go ahead and do the minutes. Why don't we just jump ahead and do the minutes early?
Or, okay.
So has everybody reviewed those?
Yep.
You were chairing that meeting.
Oh, right. So I move we approve the minutes of September 18th, 2017.
I'll second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry, abstain.
I abstain as well. And we have the upcoming Selectmen's meeting schedule where tonight we are here, and tomorrow night, as the town manager pointed out, at 7 p.m., we have open meeting law training with town council.
Is that here as well?
That's
That
in
is
this
in
room.
this room.
Yes.
Next Monday night, October 9th, is Columbus Day. We have no meeting. And then Tuesday, the following evening at 6 p.m., we have a work session, which no public comments will be entertained, where we meet to discuss annual goals and objectives of both this board and I believe of the town manager as well. Is that correct? Or
Yes.
just
Well,
doing-
no, just the board.
Just
Town
the-
manager's done later,
Okay.
after you guys establish yours.
So that is a week from tomorrow night, followed by 2 weeks from this evening, we have a regularly scheduled meeting again at 7 p.m. And then town meeting is the following Monday, 3 weeks from tonight, and that begins at 7 p.m. And is-
I believe that we have changed, and we're not meeting 2 weeks from tonight.
We are meeting on the 17th. We're not meeting on Monday, the 16th. Our regular meeting that week will be the 17th.
Yeah, so
I'm
this
just-
list needs to be
I'm
changed.
Yes,
just
we have to
reading what
update
you
that.
provided me. I'm
Yep,
sorry,
nope, you're right,
that's
I gotta
correct.
update that.
We will be meeting on the 17th at 7 p.m., which is Tuesday, rather than that Monday night.
Correct. Thank you, Becky, for pointing that out.
And moving further along, any liaison reports from anyone?
So after our meeting last week, I went upstairs because the CP CPC was still in session to discuss the discussions we had here regarding the new bylaw and the alterations. And you all saw an email that they had sent, that Becky had corresponded with Bruce, and I want to make sure that came to everybody so everybody could see the context. Part of the discussion was, how did this come about? And the situation was that the planning board had reached out and said that maybe it'd be better for them to have yearly reappointments. The reason they did not reach out to the Board of Selectmen is because they felt very strongly that they needed continuity in some of their memberships to do a good job, because it's a very complex set of guidelines and situations involving CPC. So as their advocate, I would say that I have absolutely no issue with their decision not to reach out to the Board of Selectmen, and I know that was a concern last week regarding who got to input whether or not they wanted to change their appointments from 1 to 3 or not. So that's me liaisoning for them. So if anybody has any challenges with that or wants to discuss that, let me know, and I'll be happy to go back and talk to them.
Any questions for Barry relative to what he just said?
Did you just confirm that one of them will be prepared to explain this change at town meeting?
I did encourage them and let them know that they would be in the seat of handling their own warrant article at town meeting, yes. And they were prepared for that.
Very good. Jack?
So as the liaison for the nonprofit council, we met today, as a matter of fact, and we had intended to provide a meeting or a yearly report to town meeting at the last meeting, as we have done annually, but we weren't able to do it at the last town meeting because of scheduling and the challenging agenda. So we'll do that this meeting. It's expected to take around 5 minutes. Mark's been in touch with the moderator, and it's led by Neil Kemp, who is from the new temple, with some exciting news about the temple and its upcoming, its opening, and their thoughts about community service in the town of Groton.
Great. Anything further from any selectmen? How's the audit review committee doing?
We met on Friday. We had a pretty long meeting, I'd say over 2 hours. The committee asked me to receive feedback from some of the department heads on the report so that they can factor that into their final report. Allison has drafted the rough draft of the final report, sent it out to the committee today. They'll talk about it at their next meeting, which I will schedule once I hear back from Matrix, because there was some follow-up information that they wanted from Matrix, so I've sent an email off to Matrix asking for that information. And they also asked for Matrix to review the strategic plan and operational audit done for the fire department, because the committee wants to make sure that people realize that that was done, even though it wasn't done by the audit review committee. So I emailed the 170-page final report to the entire audit committee to see that it was a pretty detailed review of the fire department as well. And I asked Matrix just to look at it and see if there's anything that stands out to them, and whether or not they want to comment on it and incorporate some of that into their final report.
So then what would the timeline be for this to get in front of the selectmen?
I'm hoping that we schedule the audit review committee meeting within the next 2 weeks, and then hopefully right after town meeting, we'll bring the audit review committee into the selectmen. That sounds?
Yeah.
That's great. Excellent. Well, the clock on the wall says 7:14 and a half. So I think that being close enough to 7:15, we can move on with the electric light commissioners.
Is this an official?
It's not a hearing. It is not a hearing. Nope.
So just in case some of you don't know, since our garages have been finished and the parcel is subdivided, so it's really just the 2 garages and like between the tree line out a little bit past our storage towards Broad Meadow. We did our second RFP, and we received a proposal that the Geld Board was able to unanimously support, and so we are here to make sure that, or I guess request that a warrant article be finalized for town meeting.
I believe we have one called Article 13.
Correct.
Have you reviewed that?
Is it
Kevin
the same
wrote it.
one that I wrote? Okay. Well, when you say...
Town council also reviewed it and signed off. on it.
Okay, if it's this, absolutely.
Town meeting would vote to authorize the selectmen to dispose of the property, which you would work, because it's town property, the selectmen have to dispose of it. but you would take the recommendation from the Light Commission. And then my understanding is the Light Commission voted to finalize a purchase and sales within 6 months?
Yeah.
So the town meeting vote would stand once we've done that before. You remember when we sold Squanicook and Tarbell, we had the town meeting approval, and then the selectmen negotiated the P&S, and that was done sometime after the fact.
So contingent upon final details being agreed between the two parties.
So I guess that begs the next question, which would be the respondent to your RFP, who you want to enter into a purchase and sale with. I believe they're here tonight. I think that folks at home might want to know what they'd be voting on and what would be going in. So I don't know if you'd like to share that with us?
Sure.
You can either sit up here with this microphone or that
no,
microphone.
I'd love to sit right next to you. So my name is Andrew McElroy, and my family is doing the restaurant on Station Avenue, right across from the Gell building. And so we responded to the RFP for the old Gell building down by the rail trail. And you'll see in our response to it, which you have here, and it was also some of these renderings were published in the Groton Herald in the most recent version of it. Some of our vision for what's possible, we think, for the end of Station Avenue. So if you look through here, what you'll see is that the building's been rehabilitated. So we did a lot of rehabilitation on the station house, which is 20 Station Avenue, the old fire station. And we think that you can apply a similar kind of rehabilitation to the building that's down at the end of Station Avenue. So in the renderings you see here, these are schematic, and this shows you some of what you might be able to do there. So our architect helped us with this, and you'll see that it has a brick facade on it, and some of these bays have been rehabilitated, so you see ice cream there, and vegetables and fruit and those kinds of things. And the general idea is that you can enhance the appearance of it. You can make it a place that's a walking destination. You can put in small bakeries, things you can go down there with your family, get something to eat. You can also clean up the area around it. So you can put in, and you'll see the restaurant right now, put in a number of plantings around it, lamps to illuminate the area, those kinds of things, all done in period detail. And we think that something like that would look really nice at the end of Station Avenue. So we put together a number of renderings so that you can see, because it's easier to visualize it when someone puts something together like that, what we think would be possible there. Also, you'll see we put in some, on the top of the roof, some solar panels. We thought that was kind of a cool idea, because you put in some solar panels, so there are these that are depicted here, and it makes it easier to see it. But also, Tesla has a new kind of solar panel, which so they look just like French slate shingles on a roof. We thought that was kind of cool because that's very much in keeping with the New England character. If we put that on here, you won't be able to tell if they're solar panels. And we thought you can put in charging stations too, because that pairs well thematically with Groton Electric Light Department and just kind of general Go Green initiative that we have in Groton. So these are all things that we thought were possible and we thought would be really cool, and wanted to advance those ideas and see what people thought. And we welcome any feedback.
Okay, and so basically it's the same footprint, same building that currently exists, or is there additional building?
No, so what you see here is the exact same building with, as far as our architect put together, exactly the same, fitted with a brick facade. Maybe this has some change of the roof line, I'm not 100% sure, but otherwise, same footprint.
And have you addressed parking and access, how you would access that?
If I may, Andrew? Sure. We had a meeting today. I sat down with the McElroys and Don Black, along with our town planner, and we discussed the issue of parking. And one of the things that probably would make the most sense is to finally get that parking lot behind Prescott School constructed and somehow figure out whether or not we could cross the wetland and have access into the Station Avenue from that parking lot. We looked at it. We think it's possible. Takashi, as a former conservation administrator, had some ideas. And the McElroys agreed to have one of their engineers take a look at the location and determine whether or not it's feasible and what the potential cost of doing something like that is. And then we would advance something back to the board. I had a meeting about a month ago with Bob Pine talking about this very matter, and this has really accelerated that process.
Questions?
So I'll start with saying, firstly, thank you for this potential contribution and the enormous contributions you've already made to the town. Just enormous. And don't let the fact that I'm asking questions imply anything other than just wanting to know that we've got something viable, that if we make a sale, that it moves forward. How would the building be owned and operated? Would you retain ownership and operate it and manage the property as the owner and lease out to tenants, businesses, for instance, a bakery as an example?
So the way we probably structure, let me back up. So I think the way that we structure the purchase when we respond to the RFP for the old fire station is that my folks purchased it individually, and then later they created an LLC, 156C Massachusetts LLC, and just transferred into that. That's something that we would probably do here. My folks would buy it and then put it into an LLC. Now, for exactly how you would put in different shops here, I mean, there are going to be a number of hurdles there. I mean, you can think of sewer capacity, you could think of anything else that would be involved in that process. So we don't have all those details ironed out. So I couldn't tell you all those things. I would anticipate that if something like this were to happen, that probably we would own the building, enter into leasehold agreements with people who want to lease, the way this is organized, a bay of that area, or however else it would be organized on the inside, and enter into those kind of agreements. If it turned into something where we were operating one of those bays ourselves, that would probably make sense too. So not 100% sure, but it's, we would anticipate there's some flexibility around the structuring. But overall, this is the general idea.
So it sounds like overall you would own, and you are an entity, an LLC type entity, still controlled by you, or the family would continue to operate the building itself.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. So it would probably be, my folks would be wholly owned by my folks.
Okay.
That's right.
When you looked at this with land use, there were some challenges with regard to impervious surface before with regard to the use of the building as a fire station, there as a fire station. Does it look like, given the proposed use here, that there'll be issues there?
It would still be a challenge,
Okay.
but it's something that we would investigate further.
Okay. And lastly, I note the sort of advanced engineering here, but I also note the horse and buggy that you have here in the schematic.
Yeah.
I wonder if you reconcile those.
That was the feel-good approach.
Yeah, we thought,
Definitely.
hey, getting around a horse and a buggy, why not? I mean, that's also part of the Go Green movement.
So,
yeah,
have you
horse
made
and buggy
arrangements
a
with
little
Mr.
bit.
Delaney for street cleaning?
Yeah, well, like I said, there are a number of details that need to be ironed out here. And the horse and buggy approach, has, there are some things to think about.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Becky?
I also want to thank you for your dedication, and the station house looks great, and it would be lovely to have this building looking like that. I'm unclear about the status of the dirt road, and is any of that, are we giving up any rights to the road by selling this property?
No.
Is the road a road, or is the road just dirt?
Well, it's a right-of-way.
No, I'm
No, it's a
very
good question.
serious.
It's a right-of-way out to,
Broad Meadow.
Broad Meadow. I would suggest that as we contemplate any permitting of this, the town finishes that roadway and paves it out to Broad Meadow as part of any development
And
there.
accepts it.
Exactly. That would be my suggestion.
And is that, if the town proceeds to turn the dirt way into an actual road paved, is that going to work with your concept of this building?
Yeah, so one of the things that we were thinking of is mitigating traffic flow issues, safety, because you can put in sidewalks or signage and line it and do whatever else is appropriate. And yeah, we think all that, those are all positive things that are probably fairly easy to do there and has a lot of benefit for everyone. So yeah, we think that's a great idea.
I mean, it seems like they would go hand in hand. To have an attractive place to buy stuff down there is going to bring more traffic down there. And the town, for a long time now, has really needed that to be a real road, so. Okay, thank you.
I mean, part of the vision of the Station Avenue Overlay District, or Town Center Overlay District, however you want to refer to it, was always to try and address that area for emergency access, if not throughput down in that area. And that to have a bottleneck occur on Station Avenue is already difficult enough with the businesses that currently exist. And you know, a lot of people know that it's kind of like a shortcut going down that area. And to codify it, as long as we're cognizant of Court Street and the neighborhood that is down that end and not sending any more traffic down that way, as well as being able to deal with Broad Meadow Road in terms of it being a floating road, having issues crossing, was it James Brook down there? And limiting truck traffic and various things down there. Those are all things that have to be addressed, and I think a part of tying into the discussion of putting a municipal parking lot in with a wetlands crossing into Prescott, and I think all of that's integrated into one large plan that has to be solved. And I think that a committee really needs to be established of land use, conservation, you know, planning, as well as highway. And Prescott as well. So I think that's something that needs to be put together.
One of the exciting things about this proposal is, you know, several years ago, the planning board offered a vision of Station Ave redevelopment. It's had fits and starts and stops all over the past 10 years. And, you know, with the station house being completed, the beautiful building that Geld built on Station Avenue, this would really finish that off. You know, we're going to be paving Station Avenue over the next month, hopefully. We put in granite curbing and everything else. I think we're finally going to get what the vision was, and it's in no small feat thanks to the Light Department and the McElroys for coming forward with this plan.
Very much in agreement. Barry, did you have anything?
Is this zoned already to allow for?
It's part of the overlay district,
all
Barry.
the-
They have to go through the overlay, the review process through the overlay district, so yes. The answer to your question is yes.
But, so there's a review process through the overlay to
Yep.
special
Through the
permit.
planning board,
because-
special permit through the planning board.
Anything else? No? Alice?
Just, I assume that kind of what we see in looking at the last image with the solar panels, that what we see is not replicated on the backside, correct? I mean, we're talking about a ballpark of 8 bays or,
Yeah, I think, are you asking if the building has garage doors on the other side of it?
right, I mean, my
as well?
assumption is that it does not. Or if it did, that they would be used for loading or things like that. We're not-
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, right, I'm not sure if these schematics show any sort of, you know, new wall penetrations on the other side, but we hadn't anticipated any. We were just really trying to show this building with a new facade and, you know, a way that you could repurpose it. And we hadn't anticipated any major structural changes or I don't think in here, you know, introducing any penetrations to the other side of the building, so. I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess traffic is the biggest question, concern I would have, but I'm confident that there are a number of ways that could be worked around. And
I think the traffic solution, as I said before, is a multi-pronged solution. And I think it certainly will need to be addressed by you for your own use of parking and access, as well as we've got to deal with the town issues and between Prescott and Station Avenue all at the same time. So, very good.
I do have one more question, if I may.
Yeah.
So we mentioned that this might spur, or I don't think you think the word require was used, the work to improve Prescott with a parking lot and a road back to here, as well as an investment in a road from Broad Meadow to Station Ave. These are things that we've talked about that I personally value and think would be wonderful. but they're also not things that we have in our immediate funding and that we have prioritized and that we've said we want to do in the near future. And so my question to you is, do you require those things to be done for you to see success here, or are they gravy? Because I don't want my vote in support of this to obligate the town to suddenly create these things as priorities when they weren't priorities yesterday.
Yeah, no, I don't think it does.
Okay,
I
great.
think putting in, having some sort of broader parking solution for the center of the town in Groton, I think that's something it's not required for this. I think it's very beneficial. I think if you take a kind of a broader, coordinated approach, I think we can make that happen. But no, that's not what we're asking for.
Great, I agree with all that. The
Yeah.
benefit of the connection to Broad, that other benefit of parking, connection to Prescott, all of that. I just
Yeah.
have not thought about that as a priority for the next free dollar that we have available.
Gotcha. Yep.
Thanks.
Well, that's part of a committee that, I had suggested, maybe looking at some various grant opportunities that may be available as well. And that's-
Mass Works would be something we would definitely look into.
Well, that's certainly something to discuss.
Yep.
So, I personally am very encouraged by this. I'm certainly encouraged by the work that I've seen performed next door, and as well as Geld's building right now, and certainly finishing this off will really bring the vision that the planning board had from decades ago, in many ways, on Station Avenue to fruition. So I think it's a great idea.
It's exciting.
All right, anything from the public? Anybody have anything to say about this? Quiet group tonight, huh? Okay.
And so, assuming that we vote or whatever we have to do, well, we're going to endorse this, it sounds like. And this will be before town meeting, and you'll be prepared to explain your proposal there, right?
Yeah, I assume the way it would work is that, if you're introducing it, you would introduce it, but I would explain all these things kind of in the same way and make myself available for any questions that people had and kind of walk through it with everyone. So that's kind of the way I thought it would work.
Makes sense.
How it's gonna work, right?
Yeah.
That's the plan.
We should be clear that transactionally, the funds for this go to Geld. They do not
Absolutely.
go to the town of
They do not go to the town of Groton, it goes to the
Let's be
electric
clear,
light department.
Transactionally, even though the board of selectmen are authorizing the sale, it's not something that comes to the town. It's not available to offset any future buildings that we might do. It goes right to Geld.
This actually offsets expenditures that Geld
Right,
made
exactly.
for their
Pull
building.
off the rail trail.
Exactly, yeah.
Is that what you're gonna say?
Yeah.
Very good.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you for coming in this
Appreciate the
evening.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Can we, before they leave, can we take just document our support or announcement?
I was gonna get to that.
Well,
That's the
that's
next agenda
coming up.
item, Mr. Petropoulos, that I'm gonna be.
We could
going
take
to.
that out of order.
You can do it first, if you'd
I
like.
think it'd be useful just
Okay,
to
yep.
wrap this up for the next vote.
Article 13, does the board want to take a position?
So, just so everybody understands, we're moving on to our final draft review of the warrant that is going to be going to printer tomorrow. And Article 13 is the article that would authorize what we just heard from the proponent and from Geld. So,
Support.
Support.
I support the duly elected officials of the Groton Electric Light Commissions. They want us, if they all unanimously said this, then I support their choice.
Alice?
Support.
Support. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
And just a little housekeeping detail, I don't know if it's, I haven't looked recently, but I think the last time this RFP was issued, I looked on the town maps, and the boundaries of the parcel appeared to include all of the roadway, and I understood that that had actually, I was told that that had been changed. I don't know,
It doesn't include the roadway,
No, it
Kevin.
does not include,
Right.
half of that land is yours. We'll make sure, we'll have a slide
We
that has
actually
the
looked at
current
that this
subdivision.
afternoon down in the assessor's office.
So the town map
And
is
when we took a look at it, between the rail trail and this property is approximately half an inch. And the thing we looked at was 100 feet per inch. So without quoting me on it, it's approximately 50 feet between.
so now it's accurate, it shows,
Yes.
That's how I view it.
That's what we saw today.
yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
That's how we measure things, by half inch.
Yes, thumbnail. It was about a thumbnail.
Right, right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank
Kevin,
you.
not bad.
Not too bad. 7:35. Thank you very much.
That's not even 8 o'clock.
I know.
Sit down.
Mr. Chairman, if we could get into item number 3 in my town manager's report, and that's to review and have the board vote to approve the final draft of the warrant. I'd like to go through a couple of things with you to see if anybody has changed position and take positions.
Go through the whole thing.
Yep, Articles 1, 2, and 3, I don't see any changes. Article 4, the board was unanimous in support of that. Article 5, Allison, have you changed your position on the cap stab from last week? Any additional information, or are you still deferred?
Wait, what's Article 5?
Article 5, transferred the 500,000 into the cap stab.
I'll support it.
Okay, so that's unanimous now. Same with the stabilization fund?
So this is moving how, this is the one that moves like 10,000?
Correct.
Yeah, that's fine.
So that's unanimous on that, too. Senior Center Design, to give the board an update, I know you're still deferring your, until town meeting. We're doing the interviews Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock. The 3 architecture firms are coming in. And then I will be interviewing the OPMs after that. So we'll have an exact price for you come town meeting. I know your board wanted to wait until you had a price before you took position on that.
One of the things I wanted to point out was, I had been in contact with you about this yesterday, was when this last came before town meeting, it passed, and then it failed at the ballot. I want to make this very clear. There is no ballot this time around. This occurs at town meeting, and whatever vote occurs at town meeting is binding one way or the other. There will be no ballot. The next time you have an opportunity at the ballot will be if we have a debt exclusion in order to fund this. That's the opportunity that you would have to vote on this. Is that clear?
Yes, absolutely.
I'd
Article,
like to just say, I was in touch with at least one member of the committee, and I've said this before, but I think it would be very helpful if voters had some sense of the potential range of cost of the senior center that would result from this drawing, somewhere between X and Y based on something. Because otherwise we're at risk of authorizing money for something we're later unwilling to fund. And people should know what that is.
I believe they're planning on doing that
Okay,
based on the
that'd be great.
response. Yep.
That'd be great.
I agree with Jack.
Yep, absolutely, I agree with Jack.
I think Alan has
Yes, Ms. Allen, we'll get to, I think pretty much we would all be in agreement on that, would we not?
I think so. I would hope
We'd
so.
like to see a number on that.
Yeah, there was some pushback on that a while ago, at the risk of coming up with numbers, various risks of coming up with numbers before they're certain. There are costs or risks and benefits to it, and I think we'll gain some number of votes if we can have some hard numbers.
Agreed. Ms.
So
Allen?
this is a public meeting Wednesday morning?
No. Oh, did we post it?
We did post
Yes.
Okay, so it's a public meeting, if somebody wants to
If
hear
somebody
it.
wants to come and see the interviews, they can
Okay,
come and see the
good.
interviews. Yep.
Thank you.
Where are those occurring?
In this room.
Thank you.
The interviews are being conducted by the Senior Center Building Committee, thus it is a public meeting. Article 8, just so that everybody understands, the Finance Committee voted 5-2 to create the fund, and then voted unanimously to fund it at the 500,000. Just wanted to make sure people understand that, and I tried to clarify that in the warrant, so that everybody sees that. The appropriation for cyclical inspections, no change there.
Can I just, Mark, can I
Please.
just note, just to be clear, when you bring that up, that the two that voted against it voted simply on operational or
Correct.
Tactical grounds, not against the principle of it. They simply said there are other ways of accomplishing this. It's not
Correct.
necessary to create, but they certainly voted in favor of the money itself.
That's the point I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure there was no confusion.
Yeah.
So in the event that we were to create this fund and to put $500,000 into it, and that is successful at town meeting, that could only be used for capital, is that correct?
It can be used for any purpose that town meeting votes it to be used. The intent would be to only bring it forward for school capital.
So in the event, though...
And I think that's an
that-
important distinction.
In the event, though, that when the school certifies its budget, in the amount that we have set aside, or through the budget guidance that we're going to discuss after we finish this, and more money was needed in order to fund the operational budget, theoretically, we could go into that stabilization fund for those purposes?
Theoretically, yes, I would be adamantly opposed to that
Yeah.
because that's a one-time revenue source for operating expenses.
I'm
But
asking-
theoretically, yes.
Asking the question.
Yeah, and there's no way to restrict it for use of capital only?
Nope. Takes a 2/3 vote to take the money out, though.
Well,
That's important to know.
There is a way, it's control of the warrant article and control of the motion at town meeting, but anybody on the floor could
Can
make a
amend.
motion
Motion
to
will
amend,
amend.
so, I mean, there is a way from the Board of Selectmen could certainly do all they could to prevent it, but anybody at town meeting can do anything they want to amend the motion and change how they want the money spent.
I would hope that wouldn't
I
happen.
mean,
I hope people
I haven't seen it
understand.
ever happen,
understand.
but
It's a good question. Cyclical inspections, again, October 12th will be the date that we get that. Offsetting the tax rate, $100,000, and I heard a conversation before the meeting started. The reason it says voting to recommend, because you have to have an exact amount. You can't say up to, you have to appropriate the amount. So the selectmen voted $100,000. You
At
wanted to
least.
do some more, yes, the board wanted to do some additional research. Please tell me now if you want that number in the warrant to be greater than $100,000. I know, Barry, you and I exchanged information. I believe I sent the board out information relative to the debt service plan. I believe I sent it out last Tuesday, explaining the plan. I sent you the PowerPoint presentation I made last year, showing the savings. We'd save $1.4 million in interest by doing what we're doing, by using $272,000 in debt, in free cash next year to help offset the debt service by paying that off 14 years earlier. I think it makes a lot of sense. I would like to continue with that plan. So is the board comfortable with $100,000?
well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Ms. Manugian had deferred, so if she's comfortable taking a position, that would be an opportunity to hear from her perspective. If you're still at the same place, that's
I
fine.
pretty much am at the same place. I mean, at this point, I would be comfortable moving to against. Not because of the amount that we're talking about, but just because I think that we have, as a town, tremendous needs that have been identified, and to kind of return money to the taxpayers at this point creates a cliff for next year. And it's just to me, is kind of a confusing message.
Just to be clear too, we're talking, bless you, Doug. I put in the town manager's report in the back. What I do is I explain the money in the back, bless you again. The $100,000 would decrease the anticipated tax rate by 6 cents. So the anticipated tax rate is 1866. This would lower the rate to 1860 should it pass. And the total savings on a average valued home at $425,000 would be $25.50. Just wanted to make the numbers clear.
One sec, bud. I'm changing my position on this as well. I'm against. I think that reviewing the documentation from the school district and hearing various things that went on, I think that the district is going to be, if you were to adopt the recommendation of 3% budget guidance from the FinCom in this board, we may come up short of that number, thus potentially triggering an override or tapping into their E&D for the purposes of budget. And I would rather hold on to this money in the event that we need to increase that number above any potential guidance. So I'm against.
Allison, you still deferred or against?
No, I'll be against.
You look surprised, Alice.
I always like it when someone sees sense.
Is Jack, Becky, Barry, you still in favor of the 100,000?
I am.
Yeah.
Becky
Yeah.
and Barry?
Oh, I wanted to be 500,000, but
Okay,
I'm not gonna go
understood.
anywhere, so don't ask me.
So 3 in favor, 2 against, and then please note that the Finance Committee is 6 against, 1 in favor.
Bud, did you have a comment?
Just to follow on Mark's comment about the amount of $25 on a $400,000 house, but in reality, it's $25 on a $7,900 bill. So you're talking minuscule numbers for potentially that $100,000 could equal a 1 to 1.5% raise on a municipal employee salary line. So I agree with you. This side of the table, it says there's too many things going on that we shouldn't be giving $100,000 back because it's the minimum for what it could pay for that isn't what
As
the raise.
as long as we're in mathematical Olympics, what's the average rate, dollar amount of the rise in tax bill this year? What was the average tax bill?
I have that, hold on. The average tax bill will go from an average bill of $7,926 to the average tax bill will go up to $7,930, an increase of $169.
So it's 25 bucks on 100 and how many? 160?
69.
160?
So make it 140.
So it's $30 on 170, which is about 30% of a tax raise. So this would reduce the rise in taxes by 30%.
This could also buy a coffee, 2 coffees a quarter too. I mean, you can go down to nickel dime stuff.
Right.
$25 could pay for a 1 to 1.5% raise for town employees.
I get it, but if we're sitting here talking about how to diminish something with throwing big numbers at it, let's remember that people complain about their tax bills, and this is an opportunity to reduce the increase in the tax bill by 30%.
And I guess
Not that tax bill, Jack, the increase. That tax bill is going to go
Sorry,
down.
yes, you're
Yeah,
correct.
it's going to go
You're
down by
absolutely correct.
0.003,
Reduce the increase in tax bill.
and not even 0.5%.
I guess I have a challenge when people start talking about, well, we can use this money to pay for raise, we can use money for that. But we can't, because this is not operational budget. This is free cash. And we're not allowed to pay for, well, let me rephrase that. Our financial standards say we do not pay for recurring revenue, for recurring expenses through free cash. So I guess I challenge that.
Depends on how you pay the increases, Barry.
This was, yeah, if you remember correctly, Barry, we talked about potentially paying bonuses out, which in fact would be one-time payments, which are not going to the base pay, which are not ongoing, which are free cash.
And that is something that is in a future meeting that has not been debated and discussed.
It's this year, though.
And that's also a potential point of negotiation with unions. And there's a lot of unknowns saying this money can go where it can go, with a lot of unknowns saying, well, but none of that's been decided, none of that's been debated, none of that's been challenged, none of that's been agreed upon by anybody. And I just think that my money belongs in my pocket, and I think there's a lot of other people out there that feel the same way. And the town isn't going to use my money, then give it back to me, and I'll give it to you another year when you need it. But in the meantime, I want my 2 cups of coffee a day or whatever it's going to be. I don't really care what it's going to be, but it's my money, and I want to feel it in my pocket because I earned it, or my wife earned it, whichever the case might be. You know, so it's just a fundamental, where I'd rather give the money. I don't like giving the government interest-free loans. That's just my personal thing, and that's the way I've always held my philosophy on that. So, and I'm not going to change that. And I'd rather have more and more and more money back in my pocket. But $100,000 all we can get this time? Well, that's what I'll ask for.
Barry, philosophically, I think that I would rather have the money back in my pocket and rather see it back in the taxpayer's pocket. But looking at the big picture of what's coming down the road and some of the things that we could spend it on, because this is a negligible amount, I would rather keep it in reserve. It's as simple as that.
All right, so if I went this to $400,000, it's no longer negligible.
No, it's $100.
But $400,000 offset tax rate is not a negligible number anymore, right?
But we don't have 400,000.
We do. We just don't decide to finance the to put it to pay down debt.
That's true.
That's true.
We have the money, and
Yeah.
and we can do that. We
There'll
just
be a balance of $400 and something thousand left in free cash after this 100,000 transfer. 272 would be transferred at the Springtown meeting to pay down principal on the debt. That is 100%.
I looked at the big picture, and I think that paying down the debt saves my pocket, taxpayers' pockets, a lot of money in the long run, and that is a very wise use of that money. And it's things we've uncovered in the past, and we're paying down the things that we've proved more rapidly. It'd be lovely if we could pay for everything in cash in the future, right? But I don't know that that's realistic or plausible. But even $100,000, if it can't be 500, it can't be 400, it can't be 300, I'll take 100. That's just.
It's going to be a philosophical debate that's had at town meeting and decided by the town meeting voters. And I understand both sides of the issue, and it's a tough decision. All right, I hear you. Kevin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. At first, I want to thank you guys for the level of fiscal discipline and management that you've shown over the last few years. I think this has been a really good thing, that how things have moved along. Speaking as a taxpayer, it's important, I think, to me, to be able to see that you are cognizant of how much my taxes are going up, and that saving the money for something that maybe you may need it for in the future. I'd rather you didn't do that. If you have an increase coming, if you have something in the budget that you need to pay for, I'm happy to fund it. But if you've got money left over, then don't take it back, take it from us, and then hold on to it in case you want to save it for some kind of a rainy day. We get good value for our money in Groton for our taxes, but I'm opposed to taking tax money and then saving it as a contingency. If you want to create a contingency fund, then create a contingency fund and put some money in it, and let us all know what that a certain amount of our assessment is going into a contingency fund. If you don't want to call it free cash, call it stabilization, whatever you want to call it. But don't.
We have.
So if you already have that, then I prefer very much that knowing that our taxes are going to go up by the amount that they are. If there's a way to mitigate that somewhat because you got money left over, please do it.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else have anything to say about this? So, moving on.
Mr. Chairman, the next article,
Oh, you got to go backwards, by the way.
I'm sorry, what did I do?
You went past complete streets.
Oh, because you already taken a position on that.
Okay, sorry.
You voted unanimously to recommend it. I'm sorry. The next article, you already supported Article 13, you've supported 14 and 15. Article 16, Jack and Barry voted in favor of it. Allison and Josh and Becky deferred on the community preservation. Having the information from Barry, do you guys want to change your positions?
Yes, I'm in favor.
Allison?
I'm in favor as well.
In favor.
So that's
Thank you,
unanimous?
Barry, for getting that answer for us.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then you've already supported Article 17, you've supported Article 18, and then 19, I received a phone call the other day that there's a purchase and sales agreement with somebody that's looking to put housing on that site. So I believe this article cannot go forward. I have not received official notification, so because I have not received official notification, I cannot remove it from the warrant.
Oh.
So this will be printed.
Because that would abrogate the personal sales rights.
Yeah.
No.
No, 'cause the zoning would
This
change.
would,
Could change the zoning.
this is a citizen's petition, and we don't have the right to take it away unless everybody that signed
No.
this original petition writes a letter.
But if this goes to town meeting and they rezone something that's already under purchase and sale, that's a,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm asking for some clarification, because there's if I enter into a purchase and sale with somebody under the terms that's today's world,
Yep,
and that today's world is RA,
yep.
and that gets accepted, and then somebody from, who's not an
Standing.
interested party, has no standing, thank you, got a legal point, no standing, says, well, I'm gonna change it to VCB, doesn't that kind of void my,
Planning board is going to give a negative recommendation on this, even if it does go forward, but town meeting could still change the zoning,
That'd be-
regardless.
Once it's explained at town meeting by the
No.
lead proponent, what the situation is down there, you know, while town meeting most of the time has common sense, let's hope that they...
I think you'll see a
Yeah,
motion to
common sense
withdraw
on
from the
this.
petitions.
I'm pretty sure you will.
But Barry, I understand your point
Good point.
completely.
I just, wow.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask the Board of Selectmen to vote to authorize the issuance of the warrant.
So moved.
Well, second.
Further discussion.
What was the guidance?
Guidance on what?
No, we haven't done that. This
That's
is
next.
authorizing the warrant.
We haven't
I'm
done the
asking them to let me
guidance.
print the warrant tomorrow. What's the guidance?
We have a
You want the budget
motion,
guidance?
I didn't say to adjourn the meeting.
No.
we have a motion that's been seconded. Further discussion. All those in favor? Aye.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very, very much. This will go to the printer tomorrow. Please note that we will be posting the warrant on Friday, and hopefully it'll be delivered to the homes on Saturday, because Monday is a holiday, and that does not count for the 14 days prior to town meeting. So the constable, the main requirement we have is to have the constable post it 14 days in advance. That will take place. Mr. Chairman, at your joint meeting with the Finance Committee last week, the board discussed the FY19 budget guidance The Finance Committee voted that the guidance to the town manager should keep any increase in FY19 not to exceed 3%. The board didn't take any action. I will tell you that Allison and I and Patricia and Gary Green sat down for, I'd say, an hour and a half last week, reviewing budget numbers, reviewing trends, reviewing expenditures, looking at the last 10 years. Patricia did a phenomenal job on a spreadsheet today that she sent to Allison, which I can share with the rest of the board, showing our growth rate over the last 10 years. Actually, she broke it down to the 10-year average, the 5-year average, and the 3-year average. And when you look at the numbers, you can look at an increase, and I can tell you exactly why the budget over that 3-year period increased those particular years. And it's very explainable. So it's really, really good information. So I think the guidance to the town manager of 3% makes sense. With regards to the school committee, it's very difficult for the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee to say, this is the increase that the schools should get. I think that's the statutory responsibility of the school committee. What I would suggest the board do as part of your guidance is tell me what I have to keep municipal spending to. And if that's 3% or 2.5%, whatever that number is, I think 3% makes sense. I will do that, and I think you should also direct me to work with the Groton Dunstable Regional School Committee in the town of Dunstable to come up with a reasonable increase that meets the needs of the Groton Dunstable Regional School District, and try to incorporate that into the budget that I bring forward. That would be my recommendation to the board. I also want to say that there were some comments made by members of the school committee last week. One of the members stated that the town of Groton purposely and grossly, this is an exact quote, purposely and grossly underestimate revenues and overestimate budgets. I have prepared a letter which I will be sending to the school committee, I'll copy the Board of Selectmen, that sort of rebuts that statement. And I'm hoping the school committee addresses that at their next meeting, because it is a very unfair and inaccurate statement. And I just want to set the record on that. I will be providing that to the school committee. That said, I'm looking for guidance from the board.
Was that statement made at a school committee?
It was made at a public school committee
Yes.
meeting. It's on camera. If you like, I can send it to you, Becky.
Jack?
I would, just to this point, I watched that clip and I was very disappointed in the statement. And I'd ask that, as we try to work together, that we make sure we don't force ourselves apart. And secondly, if we're going to have concerns like this, that we bring these concerns to each other and ask for examples before we make statements that allege fact. So I'll ask the school committee to come forward with example, or members of the school committee that have these concerns to come forward with examples of a lack of transparency, because that word was also used.
Yes, it was.
Purposeful estimation of revenue, purposeful overestimation of cost. Bring those examples forward, and if they're just questions instead of examples, bring those questions forward, and we'll resolve them in a much more useful manner than to make statements like this in public.
I agree with you 100%.
I agree as well. And do you want to respond to that before I move on?
I would.
You need the microphone, please.
I'd like to respond because Mark had said members, which I'm one of them, and I sent you a letter and read it at the meeting. So,
I think I said a member. If I said members, I
This
misspoke.
was not your letter that we're referencing.
okay, so that would be one thing. In regards to information, just to point of reference, Jack, in regards to revenues and actuals and versus budgeted, there was a differential. I've shown you that in that email with the attachments. That's the only thing I can speak to. And anything that I have mentioned in that letter, I think I pointed out. I just wanted to basically bring that to your attention in regards to that. So if you have any questions regarding that, I'm available anytime to come in or at a public meeting.
Yeah, I think that I appreciate your clarification, but certainly what the town manager and Jack were referring to had to do with another school committee member's statements, which I watched and actually vehemently disagree with that individual as well. And that before we get into a fight in the sandbox, I think we got to realize that the Board of Selectmen is supporting many initiatives that the school needs, and that working collaboratively together, we're going to achieve much more than to kick sand in each other's faces.
Agreed.
Okay, please, let's leave it at that.
There was some reference to letters that we got. Did we all get these?
Yeah, we all got a letter
We
from
all got a
Marlena.
letter.
Okay.
Yep.
If you need another copy of it, Mark can
I have
forward it
it,
to you.
I absolutely have it. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm recommending 3%.
So just let me ask you a question.
Yes.
My understanding of the numbers that came out of the school committee summit and subsequent numbers that were referenced is that the schools will be receiving in various types of state aid almost $300,000 or more than $300,000 in cuts. If we gave you guidance that said that the municipal side has to balance with whatever the school increase is over last year, or not increase, but in order to fund the schools equal to what we did last year percentage-wise, I would ask that your budget guidance on the municipal side equal the percentage of the two aggregated together. Would that make any sense?
Not to me.
Let me try and explain it again. Let's say the schools come in not an assessment, but an increase of 4%, okay, rather than the 3% that we're triggering. And the
Assessment
school-
of 4%?
Not an assessment.
Okay.
An increase.
An increase.
Operational growth rate of 3%.
Growth rate,
Okay.
exclusive of capital, okay, of 4%. And we give guidance right now of 3%. I want to know what that's going to do to the municipal side budget with the assumption of a 58%, 42% split. Can you just look, I don't want you to do two budgets, Mark. I'm not asking you to do that, okay? But what I am asking you to do is to be cognizant of what the school number is coming to. And when you develop and devise your budget, that you're aware of what number they're coming in at.
I appreciate that. And I would hope that the communication that I've had with the school department over the last 4 years will continue in fiscal 19, because I believe the communication has been outstanding between myself and administration, business manager, and superintendent. I'm hoping that that continues this year. So I believe, Josh, if you give me the guidance to meet the needs of the school department, and you also have to take into consideration the town of Dunstable, and to keep municipal spending not to exceed 3%, I think I can do that. Now, depending on what that final number from the schools is, you know, that could impact the municipal budget further. I have to come back to the selectmen and talk to you about that, and the finance committee and talk about that. But I would like to at least have the opportunity to work with the administration to come to some sort of understanding.
As long as, again, you're cognizant of the number they're leaning towards to try and make this work, so we don't sit in there in February faced with $300,000 in cuts on the municipal side in order to meet the school's need.
Yeah, Marlene-
That's all I'm getting at.
Marlene, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are starting a lot earlier this year, and you should have a better handle on things by the time I'm required to turn my budget into the selectmen on December 31st in Finance Committee. Is that correct?
So first, I'm talking as an individual school committee member, so for clarification, not for the whole board.
Yep.
It is my perception from going blind, looking at our budgets, and spending the amount of time speaking with Michael Knight, that it is not an unrealistic budget perspective to believe that the school budget will grow, the operations budget will grow less than a 4.3, 4.5%. And to be frank and just straightforward honest, because I just think that realistically, we want to deal with some realistic
The
numbers.
assessment or the operating budget?
The operating budget, and the reason for that is last year, we grew at a 3.18%, but this year we lost Title I, we lost foreign exchange tuition, and our circuit breaker is only reimbursed at 65% versus 75%, which totals, and our insurance came in $60,000 higher, which has to all be accounted for in our budget for FY19. That's $380,000. That equates to 1.05% of that growth. So that is what is driving the number up higher from that 318 to that 4.3, 4.5 number. And that's just the reality of it. I wish we didn't have those cuts in revenues, but we do. And we do because of the fact of the financial status of our town. That's why we lost Title I, because we no longer are eligible for it, because we make enough money that we're not needing it, according to the state.
How much money are you going to save in the audit that you don't have to do anymore because you're not receiving federal funding?
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Well, let me ask you a question. Does that take into consideration the $300,000 that you have in capital in your operating budget?
So this is my perception. And again, I'm speaking on the 5.34% projected number that was shown at the summit meeting for projections. That captures that loss of 380 that we're going to have to continue on the 19 and the 20 and the 21 budget, but it also captures the loss that we have to use our E&D to replace. Our E&D is not 5%, it's only 1.6. I know you've looked through all our budgets. You saw the same ugliness that I saw. It is what it is. E&D is not at a healthy level, so if we use it and we start not replenishing it like we used to do years ago when we had no choice, it's going to set us back in the same situation as we were, and we can't go backwards like that. So, I mean, I would like to have better news. Will the audit bring us savings? I really do think it will, but it will come with choices for taxpayers to decide if they want those changes made, and they won't affect the FY19 budget. Realistically, we'll see some nice change if everyone agrees to those changes for FY20, 21. And it depends on how much change is acceptable to our town.
So I think what makes sense, though, is that the FinCom and the Selectmen have discussed this for a while, and for us to adopt the budget guidance that the FinCom has recommended certainly would be prudent, but the town manager needs to be cognizant that your number may be different than what we expect, and that we're going to have to reconcile that difference in order to avoid an override. I think that's what the goal needs to be. Is that fair?
I can live with that.
I don't know what y'all think about that.
Well, what I think is, I would really like to understand, I've never seen it in print, I just hear numbers flying around. What is the guidance recommendation that we're even deliberating?
3% at the moment.
3% growth on the municipal budget.
Okay, none of that's in writing anyplace, right?
Well, it's right here on 4, but that's the, to be clear, that was Mark's proposal, working with Bud and Gary and Josh.
I don't believe that was his proposal. Was that, Bud?
Mark's proposal?
No.
It wasn't our proposal, was it?
Our proposal.
That was our proposal, not
Fine.
Bud's,
That was
not
the
Mark's
proposal that was
proposal. I don't want to
presented-
give,
That was a proposal that was presented by Mark at the last meeting.
That is correct.
Regardless of, and I apologize for asserting that it was his proposal when he presented it. I think that
Right, so
should be
it-
allowable confusion, but that's okay.
It was mentioned before, but then there was this other stuff about 3% for the budget, but then there was something else. There was another part of it.
So the simple explanation is that if both the school and the town's budgets grew, operating budgets grew by 3%, and our revenues grow by 3.7%, keeping in mind that the school's reimbursement comes up short, that we will be able to maintain the growth in the school budget in their assessment and the growth in the town budget without an override, given last year's school, state, federal funding formula.
Right, and I understand,
Okay.
I understand more about the school budget right now than I do
Okay.
about our side. I understand they're not getting all that money.
Yep.
They need to grow at a higher rate, and it's higher than fits in with our 3%. But there was something about 3% on the revenue side and something on the other side.
go ahead, Bud.
There's, without trying to get too confused in here, Jack's made the statement of 3%, 3%, real spending at the level we are spending, teachers and that's correct. Now, because of what Jack mentioned, where the state aid to the schools has been flat at like 10 million. So that 3% that they would normally, they're not getting a 3% for the
Right.
10. So the towns have to pick up that money now because it's flat.
Right.
So someone's going to pick up the inflation on that $10 million because the school's spending. The towns have to pick that up. So when they spend 3%, the assessment to the town of Groton is 4.5. So when you look at Mark's model, he has 3% for the town, and assessment to the town from the schools of 4.5, and the total of that equals 3.7, which is the same as the revenue. So the only tricky part here is the fact that it looks like the schools are spending 4.5, they're really spending 3, just like we are. And that was the intent. It wasn't, it was to try to make it equal. And, Mark, one quick question.
Yes.
The E&D that was brought up, free cash, one time, can I hit that to bring that up, because that's not ongoing?
Can
the,
hit our free cash.
Yeah,
Only if Dunstable does.
instead of taking it out.
yeah, well, you know what happened last
No,
year?
instead of taking it out of your operating number,
Yeah,
why can't the town of Groton use free cash for those, anything the school has was one-time crazy ups and downs, because they're not
well, we can ask them to do
sustainable?
that. We did that last year with the Capitol.
So why, yeah, but E&D, to get the E&D up, if they say they're gonna pump E&D in there, because
Yeah.
that's part of the increase of that 3.5.
Because they're funding, my understanding is that E&D, Marlene, is funding operating expenses in this fiscal year. Not one-time
I thought you were building
costs.
it up.
Well, unfortunately, we were short on the insurance, so it's covering some of the operating, sorry.
The E&D
Yeah.
used for deficiency. We have a deficiency in 2018 in the insurance, therefore it's got to be used for that. So is it being used for, it's being used for what it's actually supposed to be used for. We budgeted, it came in higher, it has to be paid for, use E&D, and then therefore you have to replenish it with E&D, which is what the contingency number is. And like when I had mentioned in that letter, we don't have that contingency, that luxury. That's why I meant by that. We're utilizing it right now to try and pay for FY18 expenses that.
Which are not one-time
Yeah,
expenses,
well,
recurring expenses.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct, but we have
So
to
to
pay the
answer your question,
insurance.
no.
Yeah,
Because we build
We have-
bus stabilization.
Correct.
It comes out of free cash.
Correct.
Even if we use it for something, we still build it up out of free
Yeah,
cash.
but you gotta remember something, to put the money into the operating
Just wondering how you get
expenses-
free cash,
Yeah.
that's all.
Well, to put the money into the operating expenses, Dunstable would have to pay their portion of whatever we put in. So if we wanna put in another 100,000 and say, hey, that can go towards building your E&D, Dunstable would have to put in $30,000.
So is it a
Does that
fair
make sense?
statement? Is it a fair statement? Sorry, Mark had a question,
No,
if it makes sense.
does that make sense?
So far,
Right.
Yeah.
Is it a fair statement then to say that if everything stayed the same as last year in terms of school reimbursements, that a 3% and school expenses, that a 3% growth rate in the operating budget of both sides would be fundable under our 3.7% revenue growth? That's fair. That's our baseline, our operating premise. That's the premise for the 3% growth.
Correct.
I think that it's 3% growth guidance. I think that we're hearing on the school side that reimbursements will not be what they are, but we're not certain about that. We're suggested. We're also hearing that expenses are going to be higher because of some uncontrollable expense growth, correct? And so we'll either, the 3% piece was predicated on sustaining current services. And it does not appear that 3% will allow sustaining current services on the side of the school. And so if we stick to 3% on the municipal side, it sounds like we know we're going to be hit with lessened services on the school side. And so I think that it is an exercise in futility to recommend 3% on the municipal side when we know that there are going to be unanticipated or unavoidable expense growth on the school side and unavoidable revenue reduction on the school side. And so that it makes some sense for us to begin the exercise of looking at paring down in order to account for those unavoidable increase in assessment.
I think that's why I said that I want the guidance from the board to be not to exceed 3%, but to work with the school committee to meet their needs and adjust accordingly. I believe that's what I said. I think I said that. If I didn't.
that's what I asked you to say.
Yeah, I think that's what I said. So, I agree with you, Jack, 100%. 100%. So, I think that guidance does that. And it pretty much puts, I have to work with the school committee, and of course, work with the finance committee and the selectmen, and come back to you and work with you accordingly. I don't want to decimate the municipal side to fund the schools, and I'm sure the schools don't want that. One thing I want to avoid is I don't want to hear that I'm underestimating revenues to force an override. That's not the case, and I don't want to hear that throughout this process, because that's not what we do on the municipal side, ever. As a matter of fact, the last 2 fiscal years, we've turned back $251,000 in unallocated and unexpended tax capacity, and $170,000. And this year, we're going to turn back $161,000. So please keep that in mind, that even if I overinflated revenues, we still don't spend all the money that's available to us.
Fair statement.
Thank you.
So what's on, Allison, I'm sorry.
So I'm struggling kind of from an approach perspective, and I feel somewhat like Becky does, I think, in that I have a very good grasp of the school committee budget and their process at this point, whereas still feels really foreign to me.
Getting better, though?
Getting better,
Good.
and our meeting was incredibly helpful.
Good.
So I'm wondering, and it may be more of a verbiage kind of thing, I'm more comfortable with the idea of asking the town manager to maintain current staffing and programs, services, and to understand what those look like when rolled forward, rather than giving what feels to me anyway, like, and I understand where it came from mathematically, but an arbitrary percent that doesn't to me anyway indicate whether we would be cutting services, adding services. I mean, I don't have any feel for what 3% really means.
Here's the problem. Can I interrupt you for just one second?
Absolutely.
The problem is I have 7 union contracts that are all up on July 1st of next year that start the fiscal year.
Understood.
And to roll things forward and not understanding what that impact is very difficult. So I'm going to have to obviously meet an executive session with the Selectmen and the FinCom, talk about those issues, and factor that all into the guidance. So I think what Allison is saying makes a lot of sense. Maintain what we have and then understand what the impact of percents of increases in collective bargaining agreements. I think that's what we need to do. So I think what Allison's saying is 100% spot on.
So level service budget,
Pretty much.
that's guidance.
I mean, to me, that makes sense, and then certainly I would want to hear from the town manager at any point if there were vital services or staff to add,
Yep.
or areas where you felt that you would want to reprioritize.
Yep.
But to me, that approach feels much more comfortable and makes more sense than picking a percentage and
Bless you.
trying to back into
I could go along with
all
it.
these variables.
Could you go along with a level
So-
service budget?
Well,
I think so, I don't know.
but that's what 3% is.
That's what it is.
That's what 3% is. That's what the whole
Well,
sustainability
and
committee
that's-
that we've been serving on was all about, was sustainable current budget. How do we sustain it? No growth. No growth other than cost growth. No growth in services.
I'm good with that.
The purpose of having a percent assignment, which we did a couple years ago, was to say, all right, give us a sustainable number, give us a number of cuts at, if the sustainable is 3, show us cuts at 2.8, show us cuts at 2.5. And it was an exercise in what ifs, which was to me a very valuable thing. And it looks like we're going to get into some what ifs this year.
I hate what ifs.
I
but-
know, I don't blame you.
Well, that's why I think what Allison said in terms of a level service budget, maybe 3%, who knows? You don't know what the collective bargaining impact is going to be. Level service budget and work in conjunction with the school committee and the town of Dunstable, excuse my language, is good guidance.
Barry, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, what's 1% of municipal budget in dollars?
1%, the budget last year was including debt or not including debt? No debt is 13.5 million.
So 1% is 135,000. So we're talking about extra funds, if it's 3% of roughly $400,000.
3% 400.
Keep in mind that a major portion of that 400,000 is health insurance and pension.
So if the schools are telling us now that they've got about $380,000 need, and we're talking about that we can only allocate 400 and 600, right? That's basically what we're saying, $1 million total.
So I think the number to the Groton Dunstable is 800 something thousand.
So
800,000 is a lot of money, Barry.
I got you, yes, absolutely. If we're really gonna get an extra in the assessment, sorry, so our net would be, I don't see how we can even begin to consider that we should give guidance that you should increase the operating budget by $400,000, because it seems like you're gonna have $200,000 short, based on my math, based on what the schools need. So that's question number one. Question number two, what's been our guidance for the past 3 years, if any other members can?
2.2, 2.4.
That's 2 years. Oh yeah, we didn't give guidance prior to that, correct?
That's
We only
right.
assumed the third.
But your guidance
New
before that
practice.
was balance the budget, Mark.
Yeah.
I like that guidance.
Yeah.
Jack,
That's what got us into this problem in the first place.
No, whoa,
No,
I
did
take
you have to
exception
go
to
there?
that. I take exception to that.
And then, what has been the net municipal increase over those 2 years? When we gave guidance to 2.2, 2.4, what actually happened when we actually got through fall town meeting and ended up with a real budget? What has been the actual increase? So when we say 2.2, it becomes,
I'm not gonna get those numbers off the top of my head.
It was about 3.5% is my recollection. Bud, do you remember that?
I gotta hear them.
Pretty sure it was
I
about,
knew someone would have it.
I'm pretty
so.
sure it was 3.5.
I don't know it off the top of my head.
While we wait for him to answer.
Go for it,
can I
please,
go
yes.
in? So my sense here is that while there isn't a perfect, like, do this that's gonna fix all the problems or solve it all, I do think there's some merit in the percentage guidance. I think that has helped the town shift to being extremely disciplined and diligent about this process. The truth is, as we can all see right now, there's a bit of a problem ahead of us. There's not enough money coming in to fund what we feel is the bare minimum, and for legitimate reasons. It's not because there's been bad management here. And so it may be that we can't stick with a 3% increase in the end. It may be that a couple of months from now, we are facing some other difficult decisions. But I think at this point, the combination of saying 3%, of saying level services, and of saying work with the school district to come up with the best we can, that's a complete set of guidance that we ought to stick with.
But it's a little bit like looking for a $500,000 house when you know you can only afford a $300,000 house. You know, why are we going to go through that when we have good reason to believe that it's not something we're going to be able to do?
Two questions. Well, one, Bud, do you have the answer to that?
No, just the question we're debating here, though, is that we're saying that 3%, which is both sides, is not correct because the schools deserve more than the town. So I think that's, the municipal side, and maybe that's maybe what the town are going to vote. But I mean, we're saying whatever work with the schools, and if they need another 1 or 2%, we're going to take it out of the municipal, which says whatever that means, no raises, no people, whatever the answer becomes. And I'm saying we're making that call now, and I think Mark should put a plan together that says we should work with the schools and say, if they need more, how much can he get? And then there's a point in time that says, maybe you don't want to cut the municipal anymore to get the school more. There's some point in time that says somehow there's got to be a balance between the two of them. It's not like they're both running out of control. They're sort of both in control, if you read the studies, on the rails. So it's a decision the town is going to have to make to say, I want to pay for the schools and this, I want to pay for municipal, I want to cut municipal for this, or I want an override. I don't know what the answer is, but I think Mark's guidance should be, what can he do on the municipal side to help the schools out to a point that says, then the board and the town is going to have, and the finance committee is going to say, is that the right thing we want to present to the town? I don't know what the answer is, but it's certainly got to be some balance between the two of them.
But that gets back to the guidance and why we came up with the 3% number, because the 3% number equaled what a level service budget is.
But the school's
So-
saying they can't do that.
Given assumed reimbursements and given a consistent cost growth, we're seeing higher or lower reimbursements, expectation of lower reimbursements, and unusual cost growth.
I get that.
I'd like to propose that we request as we have before, 2 bits of guidance, one at 3 and one at 2.5% growth. And it gives us at least some goalposts, some milestones to work with. And I think it's a useful exercise at this point.
Marlena, did you have something?
So, speaking as a taxpayer, I'm not for cutting the heck out of the municipal budget and getting rid of services that I value for many different reasons. But I'm also not interested in funding our schools at a level that is not in the best interest of our kids. And these kids only have one chance at first grade, one chance at fifth grade. And that is something that we really need to start considering here, along with the fact that I understand what the Sustainability Committee projected for what we need to stay within our budget in order to avoid an override. I understand it, I've studied it, but what I think we need to really start considering here is the day is not the same as it was 3 years ago when that study, maybe 4 years ago at this point, I'm not sure, when the study was done. Our economy has changed, and I understand that we're in that economic expansion, but we do, like any other communities do, have to change with the situation that we are in. There will be a time that there's going to be layoffs when that expansion ends and it contracts. That's how it works. But while we're worrying about it contracting, we have kids going through grades that will not have the services that they rightfully should have while we do have the capability of providing it. I think that's something that we want to keep in mind. And that's it. I understand. I'm very conservative when I budget my school, my company budgets, and my home budget. And I know you have to, because you have to take those losses, but you can't take a hit while you're taking those losses. You can't not allow your company to grow and be stagnant because you're afraid that the wall's going to come down. You have to do, there's got to be a better middle ground to find.
All right, well, we need to find that middle ground in order to give our town manager guidance, so we're not here all night. Barry, do you have anything further?
Sure. So I'll get an answer on, what the growth rate were when we gave guidance of 2.2 and 2.4 later, please.
Yep.
I really dislike the 3 number. I'd dislike it for a lot of reasons. Not only do I think it's too aggressive considering where we've been in the past, but I also dislike it because I see the reality of a $300,000 cut of state funds that went to the schools that now the town is going to have to take care of to compensate the schools for, and that's assuming that everybody does the level budget or level services that we want to do. I would be more acceptable with the level service budget, but I know that doesn't work from a budgeting point of view because it's very hard to say, level services, because someone's going to say, well, to be level service, I need to grow this line item by 4%, therefore someone else can only grow it by 1%. So it's a very difficult budgeting exercise. So even though I recognize that validity, I don't think it's possible to frame it that way as a guidance. Jack went to 2.5, and I'm far more comfortable with 2. I'm actually comfortable with 0, like I've always said, but I don't think I'll ever get 0% growth out of any year here. So I would prefer that we see a budget at 2 and a budget at 3.
All right, well, Jack proposed 2, 5, and 3. You proposing 2 and 3. So that's 3 budgets we'd have to have Mark do.
I think that the common idea here is 2 points, a sustainable in current terms and a what-if number that's lower. I don't really care whether it's 2 or 2.5 or 2.7. So I'm not as picky about what that number is as I am the idea of having a second number.
So then, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, so then what I said at the beginning of the meeting is that direct me to develop a budget, following along with Allison said, level services, taking into consideration the needs of the Groton Dunstable Regional School District, and then I can outline the impact of that to the board. Coming up with 3 budgets or 4 budgets or 5 budgets does nobody any good. So give me the opportunity to be the manager and come up with a budget that meets the needs of the municipality, taking into consideration health insurance increases, collective bargaining and the like, work with the school department, and give you one budget that does all that. I can do that. Coming up with a budget that this is 3, this is 2, this is 1, this is 5, it does a couple of things. It kills morale on the municipal side, because it certainly did 3 years ago when we went through that exercise. I think Josh and Jack will remember that. And Barry, you were on the finance committee at the time. Also, you were on the school committee. I mean, it was just such a mess when we did that. I don't want to do that again. So, my recommendation to the board is to vote to authorize me or direct me to develop a budget that is level services, that takes into consideration collective bargaining and health insurance increase, while working with the school committee to meet their needs and develop that budget, and keep the board informed as I go through the process. Bud, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that's what I thought we said at the beginning when we changed it. That's the right way to do it, I think.
That's what I heard.
When you changed it?
No, we went from the 3%, because the 3% is going to be the max you're ever going to get out of this, and the answer is, what is going to take you, and it's going to be less than 3%, and the question is how low, based on the school. So need to work with the school, and whatever it comes out to be, then we make the decision at that point in time and says, okay, can we live with that? We got to find out what that number is.
Well, you're the ones gonna have to do the work, and if you're fine without a number, then that's.
Well, the number, it has to have a ceiling on it,
It's
okay?
3%.
It's got to have
I'm
a,
saying I'll never
not
go
to
over
exceed
3%.
3%.
I'm not going to come in with a budget that's 12%.
The number that matters is not, the number that matters is 3.7%. That's the number that matters.
Right, that's,
That is a total revenue number.
It has to be balanced regardless.
So 3.7 is the number. Mark's going to figure out how to get there.
That's right.
We had a number that said 3 to get to 3.7. Now we're saying you
The
can't go
number is
3.7.
what it
Work-
is.
Work with the school, and you can't spend more than 3.7.
Yes.
You know what that is? That takes us back to the original guidance that we had, that we actually, I think, never really gave, but it was just avoid an override, Mark, go get it. That's what that really is.
well,
That-
I
Well,
think,
That's
I-
what-
The one caveat to that is if the, I'm sorry, Jack, the one caveat, I don't mean to point,
You
I
can do
apologize.
this, man.
The one caveat to that is, you know, we're gonna scrub revenues this year, because I know that's gonna be a focus of everybody and their brother, because of the comments made by.
My brother's a CFO, so that's good.
Okay. So what's going to happen is, if I have to go through all the numbers and it turns out that the schools need $1 million increase, say, and then that's going to cause a massive layoff on the town side, even if we up revenues ridiculously high, I'm going to come back to the Board of Selectmen and say, that doesn't make sense for the municipal government. And you're going to have to decide, okay, Mark, put a budget together that requires an override of Proposition 2.5. That's your right. That's what the Board of Selectmen will have to decide. So, Jack, I disagree with you a little bit on the previous guidance that you gave me.
Are you saying that wasn't our guidance, or
Well,
what are you disagreeing with?
I'm disagreeing and saying that put us where we are today. It didn't.
I think,
Not today, because today, for the last 2 years, and actually more than that, we've given pretty rigid guidance. It's what put us, it's the guidance that we were giving when we got to the point where we said, hey, wait a second, we got to start giving guidance. That's all I'm
so we're
saying.
giving guidance, and I think the discussion reflects that we all know that it may not be workable exactly at that, and we have people who are willing to work on it and look and see what they can do. I think I want to just point out that what I'm hearing is a very solid wish that we meet both the town and the school's needs and not get into any kind of us versus them battle, and I think that's all to the good. I hope that we can solve this, but I'm comfortable with the recommendation that Mark has suggested.
What I will say that is true from what we used to do is I think we're looking at this very differently than we used to. I think you have a much more involved Board of Selectmen, perhaps even more involved FinCom on the front side in terms of guiding where we go, and that is very different than it was, let's say, 5 years ago. And I think that we are in a different place because of that, in terms of a lot of things, not the least of which is understanding where we are and how we're going and why we're here.
I'd like to wrap this up. Kevin, you're the last public comment, and then we're going to formulate a position here.
Comment and a question. I think the way Mark described what he'd like for guidance, I think it's excellent guidance. It's the kind of guidance that management should be given to produce something for you to react to. To that, without a number, let him come up with a number for you to react to. My question is, what's your assumed rate of inflation in this budget?
That's for the big cheese.
I don't have one yet.
Well, inflation rate so far in 2017 is running around 1.6 or 1.7.
Is it that high?
So it might be lower than that. I just looked. My question is, if we got a 3.7% increase in revenue, and we're going to spend 3.7% increase in revenue, and the rate of inflation is only running at 1.5, 1.6, or 1.7, pick a number, what are we doing with the extra 2+%
Health
increase?
So, yeah, the rate of inflation.
All of it is health
Yeah,
insurance.
the rate of inflation is less relevant than the rate of growth in health insurance and the contracted growth in salary. Those are the big, for us, those are the big pseudo-inflation numbers. They're far more important to cost growth than inflation
And even
is.
if you keep salary rate.
And we know those
to
numbers.
Inflation, to follow along on that, Jack, even if you keep salary rate to inflation, health insurance is climbing at a much greater rate than inflation.
But we're only spending 3%. The 3.7 in revenue was, 3.7 was revenue increase, but you gotta remember, the state does not give us any inflation on the 10 million bucks, so we can only spend 3. So the guidance changed. 3% is the real spending. So you can say, well, inflation's 1.5, what's the other 1.5 going for?
80% of our costs grow at a rate that is irrelevant to inflation. 80% of our costs grow at the rate of salary increases, which are prescribed, and the rate of insurance increases, which are known.
And pension.
Just
pension, yeah.
one last comment on that. When it comes to presenting the budget at town meeting, the one thing I think that would be very helpful for what I'd say is a highly educated town meeting, is that you show how much of our town budget actually is independent of the rate of inflation. Because
Absolutely, we can do that.
there's a mindset out there that, well, if my salary is going up at inflation rate plus 1/10 or 2/10, how is it that the town can't live on that? And I think if you can show how to us, the reason it goes up this much is because this much of it doesn't depend on the rate of inflation. It's independent of it. That would be a really good thing to show. So that's my last comment.
Thank you.
That's a good point. All right, so getting back to this board and our guidance. I want to craft a motion as to guidance that we want to give, and let's see what kind of consensus we get.
I'll make a motion that we direct the town manager to develop the fiscal 19 preliminary budget as a level employee and service budget, working in conjunction with the school committee and the school district, with overall increase not to exceed revenue growth.
Anyone want to second that? For
So you're not
purposes of
include-
discussion.
You're not including this, oh. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll second it, yeah.
Motion's been made and seconded, discussion.
But you're not including that 3% number in this.
I think you should, instead of saying revenues of 3.7, I think we need
Right.
growth of 3%. I would say growth of 3%, Alice, instead of revenues of 3.7%.
Growth of 3% equals revenues of 3.7.
I think she just said revenue, which I think is good.
I'm okay, when I seconded it because I'm okay with the way it was worded.
Okay, I'm fine either way. I get the
It
message.
nets the
It took me a
same.
little bit longer to analyze it then.
Can you read it back, please?
Direct town manager to develop fiscal 19 preliminary budget as level employee and service budget, working in conjunction with school committee administration to not exceed revenue growth.
Oh, I like that. Anticipated revenue
Right.
growth.
Anticipated revenue growth.
I would add that word.
Friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment, anticipated, yes. Not that I can make a motion, I'm sorry.
I'll offer that friendly amendment if
Yeah,
Allison's so
we're good with
inclined.
that. I'm good with that.
Friendly amendments accepted. Further discussion.
So, we've issued guidance before and then found that we left out certain things. So did we address growth in capital expenditures in this motion?
This is operational.
Absolutely
Operational
not.
only?
Operational, and I will make sure excluded debt is not included in any numbers because excluded debt is going down $200,000. So I could play some really good shell games. I will not.
Not that you ever
Not that I ever
would or have.
Not that I want to be accused of. How's that, bud?
Leave your shells at home.
I want to set a precedent.
Yes.
Yes.
Too
So
late.
further discussion on this. I think we've beat this rug clean. All in favor? Aye. Were you and I?
Pardon me? No.
All opposed?
Opposed.
It's 4-1 in favor.
Mr. Chairman, the last thing on the budget is your other business.
Can I interject, please? I apologize.
sorry.
Just follow up. So we've said several statements, there's a challenge to growing what's happening and why we have to keep putting the budget well above inflation, and that's health insurance and pension and, let's just start at health insurance and pension. Normally when I see that in a business, I say, well, there's 2 targets that I gotta go figure out what I can do about those things. Do we have anybody assigned to go see what we can do about those things? Do we have a project underway?
Yes, we do. As a matter of fact, we're working with the Minuteman, the Neshoba Health Group. Pension, we can't touch that. So there's nothing you can do with pension. With the Minuteman, the Neshoba Health Group, we are looking at plan design changes, and we are looking at whether or not we want to institute high deductible plans as well. So there's a lot going on.
What about alternative health plans, going to somewhere else? I mean, it is somewhat a competitive market, although not really.
It really is not,
But-
and I'll tell you, we will not get a better bang than we get out of Minuteman, the Neshoba Health. The GIC, I live in the town of Grafton. The GIC is hurting the town of Grafton right
Yeah,
now
I
with the
know,
rate increases.
GIC's it was supposed to be a great thing, and it's turned.
Maya can't touch the rates that the Minuteman, the Neshoba Health Group does. It's a really good group. So, but we're working within that group, Barry, to address it. So the answer to your question is absolutely yes.
Okay, thank you.
Moving along.
Mr. Chairman, you have 2 things that Selectman Pease asked to be placed on the agenda. Under other business, discussion regarding the Board of Selectmen process for budget guidance. Did we address a lot of that tonight, Barry?
I can defer that one unless people want to discuss that. And mostly I was concerned because we have 2 new members who really could benefit from having that discussion in the open and understanding those concepts and those precepts and hearing the back and forth. And they ended up, well, I know at least one of them ended up getting that anyway, privately.
Becky and I have had conversations as well.
I also think that it's useful for the public to learn and understand those. So in my opinion, I would prefer to see a more public debate, regardless of efficiency, regardless of speed we want to get the budget guidance done, because you can tell we're going to spend 2 nights on it anyway. Where that discussion, that kind of idea surfacing and brainstorming is done more in public and less giving an idea, with our advisory committee and a member of our committee, and then coming and presenting that to the board. So that was just my opinion.
But you certainly have heard a robust discussion over the course of 2 meetings, held in public, based on the initial meetings of the chairs of the FinCom, Board of Selectmen, Finance Team, and the Town Manager. And I don't think that usurped the authority of this board to give guidance in any way, shape, or fashion, but certainly set a mold for the discussion.
And because there are certain kinds of traps that people can do in decision making, setting that mold sets a point that you're focused on. And when you set the point you're focused on, it changes the form of the discussion. If the discussion is open and starts at, we don't have a number, that changes how the discussion evolves. If the discussion starts at, here's the point 3, let's talk about that, that changes the focus of the discussion. And my guidance, my recommendation is always come into a meeting, it's supposed to be a group decision, without that focal point as being established. Let's come to that focal point on our own. Let's come to that point, wherever it should be, 2.5, 3.0, 1.6. Let's hear those 25 numbers said, and then they get resolved that way. When you set a number and you set it out on the table, people focus on that number instead of the process to get to whatever number should be valid, should be.
So are you suggesting that we do away with the meeting of the chairs and the finance team with the town manager?
I think, if I may, Barry?
I'm expressing the reality of how it affects me personally. It drives me the wrong way. The reason I'm on this board and switched from FinCom is I wanted to have more awareness and participation in budget guidance. I also think that we are a 5-member board, and that something like budget guidance is very critical to one of the few things that we can do as a policy area. And I think it can cause lagging education and awareness in some of our membership.
Can I respond?
address that.
Barry, I understand exactly what you're saying. I used that meeting with the chair of the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen to really understand and go through the numbers to see if they make sense. I mean, the finance team and I go through these numbers all the time. As a matter of fact, we're going to meet tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. We're going to go through the numbers again. So we talk about this and we go through it a lot, and bouncing it off of people like Josh and Gary, the chair, or you, or Jack, when Jack was chair, helps formulate a recommendation to the board. So maybe in the future, I still want to have those meetings, because, you know, I get great feedback from Bud and Gary, and Josh provided great feedback. So go through that, but maybe present it differently at the public meeting and give you the full presentation, but at least have an understanding of where those numbers came from. So I understand what you're saying, but I still need to have those meetings. I still want to have those meetings.
And as long as the board has said, let's have those meetings, that's fine. From what I understood, the board, at least three, myself and two other members weren't necessarily aware that that was the process.
Okay.
And I
So
shouldn't
we'll
speak
put
for
it
other
on
people.
an agenda moving forward next year, when we get to this point, for discussion by the entire board before the meeting is set.
Yep.
If the meeting is even
If the
set.
meeting is set.
If the meeting is set.
Maybe we make it a part of our selectmen policy and procedure, just as
Fair
our
enough.
operations.
And yeah, and if it's, as long as it's pre-authorized and the board is saying, yes, please, you guys go out and kind of haggle this out and then come to us with some ideas.
I may add that to your financial policies in the fall, just to say that that's going to be part of the budget process. I mean, but it's
So let's just
important to me
address
that I do
this.
that.
Let's just address this, and moving
Understand
forward,
Barry's
duly
concerns.
noted. And the second issue, Barry?
So the second issue is, there's been a few times over history where in appropriately trying to engage the public, we get to a point where something is finally ready to come forward to a public meeting, and it pops on the agenda. But there've been discussions or some type of assistance or involvement with members of the Board of Selectmen for some time, several months. I'm not saying that I want that to stop. What I would like to see is an awareness, a little notification sent that, hey, we're, Selectman A and Selectman B are talking to this individual about this item. It may never come to the point of view of it's going to come to town meeting or to agenda item, but just in case it does, know that we're engaged in this conversation. And, let that, yeah, we can't break open meeting laws, we can't do that. But also it gives an opportunity for selectmen to object if they don't want that conversation to happen without some input, because it could lead a potential stakeholder down the wrong path that wasn't representative of the whole board. Or just so we aren't sitting here, looking strange when there's been discussions for 4 months on an item and suddenly we're having a presentation on it that's championed by more than one member of this board. It gives an impression, and this is not real, this is not what is happening, but it gives an impression of things being done behind closed doors and favoritisms and things like that, which is not accurate. It's not accurate. This is just totally an optics thing. And so that's just some guidance. I would appreciate notification. I think the board has expressed challenges in the past when we've had conversations with different participants and it's been stuff that affects this board, and we didn't send that information out prior to a meeting, and we just kind of had it at a meeting. So given that idea, and that was something that was imparted to me by another member that they would appreciate that, I recognize the validity in that, and I think it's valid for all of us to have some type of notification protocol. And I don't know what that notification protocol looks like, but we might want to develop one, even if it's just a quick email, goes to the town manager or something like that.
So this is when two selectmen are engaged in something that's yet to hit an agenda.
For a long period of time, yeah, I mean, there's a difference between, I talked to this guy at Gibbet Hill and he just mentioned this. That's, I gave him some advice about that. That's different. But when you're engaged in multiple conversations over a period of time with somebody who has an idea or a plan that might come forward, that to me rises to a different level of public interest and certainly selectmen interest.
Comments from the other board members?
I mean, I agree, and to me, both of these pieces kind of feel similar, particularly as a newbie. I found a couple times, and I agree with Barry that there's no issue in the bigger picture, there's no intent, but there have been times where I come to a meeting and hear about something and feel like, well, when did this, and that it feels like things have been kind of ongoing in the background. And particularly as a new and inexperienced member, that I feel like that puts me in a difficult position of either kind of saying, oh yes, that it must be what's going on must be good and right, or kind of getting all worked up about it. And I don't feel like either of those is necessarily productive or the right path forward. So just knowing that these things are going on is helpful.
I can think about at least 10 times easily off the top of my head where individuals either within the community or businesses or things that are thinking about moving within the community have asked for meetings of myself and or another selectman, an informal meeting, prior to it being there. Sometimes one meeting occurs, maybe a second meeting occurs, but I can't think of any time that it's ever gone past 2 meetings. And if it gets that far, and somebody may lobby you, Allison, and me, or somebody may lobby Becky and Josh. But I understand Barry's point about long-term meetings that are going on for months and months and months, and multiple meetings. So I think there's a threshold of meetings. Once you meet more than twice, I think it needs to be potentially brought forward. So, thoughts on that?
Well, I certainly see, I'd like to know what's going on when I'm not involved also. And I don't think anybody likes to kind of come into a meeting and hear about something for the first time. But I also think that sometimes that's unavoidable. I'm not talking again about meetings going on over months. It's hard to imagine why or how that would happen in a way that we wouldn't be able to share at least some, just a heads up that this is going on. There might be some situations, but not very many of them. But I think there are times when just in social situations, 2 of us might be in the same place and someone else is having a conversation with us that touches on town business and gets continued in some, another meeting, so that it may, I don't want to inadvertently tie our hands any more than the open meeting already does, at being able to do business with our neighbors, to have conversations with each other and to know what people in town are thinking and feeling and would like us to be thinking and feeling about, and might be sharing that with 2 of us at the same time. So I guess there's a little bit of a judgment call. I certainly think something going on, like I said, over months, it's hard for me to imagine why that would not be able to be shared, at least in some way, to let people know that conversations are happening. But the stuff that might happen, over the last couple of weeks, there was just a couple of conversations here and there, a couple of meetings, that is different, I think.
Jack?
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is a principle rather than a procedure. I think the principle is easy to understand. People don't like to be surprised by something that has a lot of momentum to it, and that where they weren't part of that momentum. But I think that the procedural part, where we talk about 1 selectman versus 2, I think that's really arbitrary, because if people are objecting to being, I'll use the word blindsided, I don't think that's what anybody's saying, but let's just, for argument's sake, being blindsided by something that's already got a lot of momentum to it. It doesn't matter whether there's 1 selectman or 2, it's the momentum they're objecting to. So this idea that there's a 2 selectmen attribute to this is, I think, an example of sort of the artificial nature of it. And there are instances where it makes a lot of sense not to be mentioning things here in public. I was approached with regard to a marijuana facility and purposefully just did not disclose in public that someone had approached me on this, because this is not the kind of thing that I want all kinds of attention to, when it might turn out that this is a nothing. But it took more than 2 meetings to get to the point where I thought, it might be worth bringing this forward and then handing it over. So I think I would hate to be, as Becky said, constrained by procedural gatas, and much more be welcome being guided by a principle that we try to abide by.
So I want to confer that the intent is not to say that it has to be stated at this meeting. And I don't know, and that's a question I want to ask tomorrow, are we allowed to send an email saying, by the way, everybody, I'm meeting with this individual, as a notification protocol? Now, technically that becomes a public document, but it's not in a public meeting. So I don't know the nuances of that.
Lauren can answer that.
But Lauren should
That's a
answer
good
that.
question.
Because that would settle the issue you have, but still keep us in the loop that there's something going on. Clearly, yeah, we have at least we have an opportunity to say, hey, wait, what's going on?
Well, if you then say, wait,
Then
what's
let
going
them-
on, then we get into deliberation.
Then we get an opportunity to bring it to a public meeting. That's right. Which maybe we should, but that's,
That gets us into the chicken and the egg situation, okay? And we, as elected officials, have a certain duty to stimulate economic development, work on good ideas and things. But to bring something in that's half-baked is not in this board's best interest, but it requires, I think, as Jack pointed out, it's a principle. And it needs to be adhered to, that once things go to a certain level, you need to bring it to this board. Allison, your thoughts on this? Any further?
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree with kind of the direction that this is going. I do think, though, there's an element of, kind of a half-baked idea appearing before us is then going to be strengthened by us as a team, potentially, rather than coming forward with a more firm path forward, and then potentially that, whether it's economic development or something else, whoever that is in the community has lost the opportunity for input from other members of the Board of Selectmen. So it's a balancing act,
But sometimes somebody's going to say, hey, I've got something that's not ready for prime time, let me run this by you. What do you feel as one member of the Board of Selectmen about bringing this initiative forward to your entire board? There is merit to that, and a lot of things get hatched through having those meetings. So if somebody says, that's a great idea, why don't you run with it? Why don't you bring it to the board? Or there's been plenty of times where somebody said, that's ridiculous. Why would you want to do that? Well, I don't think it's ridiculous. I said, okay, then go talk to another selectman.
Well, there's been
Okay.
two examples in the recent past where this board has taken information and designated somebody to go out and work on it, just by bringing
Which is
it.
different.
First is,
That's very
Jack and Becky are working with us on the Indian Hill issue, and then Allison and I are working with the various department heads on the marijuana issue, because you guys brought it here and said, let's further do it. So I think you're all saying the same thing. I think you're all saying the same thing.
And again, to that point, if we hear about it and say, oh, great, you guys please go talk about that and go help us with that, I can only tell you that's going to help the initiative in the long run.
Sure, absolutely.
Because there's been some engagement, some involvement, and the risk that people take when they engage only 2 selectmen that come forward to present it is that feeling, that natural psychological feeling that some people have of, why wasn't I involved? How can I support something I wasn't involved in? Just feels like an end run. So, and again, that's not what it is. That's just that can be the perception. So anyhow, I've taken up too much of our time.
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
And I think we've beat 9 o'clock, so without any further ado, we're adjourned.
And we're here tomorrow night for more
7 o'clock.
open meeting law,
We're here
right?
for open meeting law training tomorrow.
Good night, everybody.